Hello, glad you can join us. We'll be discussing sustainability strategy later in the episode, but first, the IIA's VP of Standards and Guidance, Katleen Seeuws, joins Robert Perez in our studio with an update on the IPPF Evolution project and new Global Internal Audit Standards.
The Institute of Internal Auditors presents All Things Internal Audit.
Kat, welcome, and thank you for joining me today to talk about the IPPF Evolution project and provide an update for our viewers. I wanted to start with a question that talks about the public exposure and comment period ended in June, and I know that the IA staff and Standards Board are very busy looking at the literally thousands of comments that came in. Tell me a little bit about that and what are the next steps in the process.
Yes, thank you. I'm very happy for this opportunity to update the global community that has been supporting the IPPF Evolution project. In fact, the survey collecting public comments in all languages closed indeed on June 26th. And since then, our staff and the Standards Board members have been divided into working groups to analyze the results of more than 1,600 survey replies, including reading almost 19,000 specific comments, as well as considering the feedback received through letters, roundtables, and speaking engagements. Now, based on the results, the working groups are proposing now the dispositions, which include potential revisions of the draft. The revised draft standards will then be scheduled to be approved by the end of this year and will be published digitally by January next year. The goal is to have the printout version, our Red Book, published by March next year. The new Global Internal Audit Standards will then become effective 12 months after the issuance date, which means the end of 2024 or early 2025, allowing our internal audit functions time to transition and to conform with the new standards. In the time following the approval, our affiliates will start translating the final draft, and additionally, we from our side, we will start updating our other products and services throughout 2024 and 2025.
But I did want to address a couple of specific areas for you that will be impacted by the new standards. Let's start with certifications. What should current internal audit practitioner and certified internal auditor candidates know about the changes to the standards?
The exams, the CIA exam and the internal audit practitioner exam will change. However, the new internal audit practitioner exam will not change before July 2024. And for the CIA exam, that will be no earlier than March 2025. So still some time there. And the new CIA exam will then include the content changes based on the new standards, and there will probably be some changes in the CIA structure as well, as you may have already heard of. The CIA learning system will obviously be changed as well and will then also become available March 2025 or a little bit later.
Similarly, what should internal audit leaders know about standard changes in terms of performing the required external quality assessments for their QA/IP programs?
The new standards will impact the external quality assessment, and we do have some recommendations for those looking ahead to their external quality assessment, because you don't have to wait to conduct your external quality assessment until the new standards are effective. In fact, if your EQA is due this year or next year, it still will be performed against the current standards. If your EQA is then due late 2024 or 2025, you can choose to accelerate your assessment to still occur it this year or early 2024 against the current standards. However, if you proceed your EQA in conformance with the current standards, then you should consider a readiness assessment to detect the gaps and take appropriate measures to prepare for the new standards implementations. On the other hand, if your assessment is due in 2025, you also may want to consider to do this readiness assessment, as you will be assessed against the new standards, but this readiness assessment may be useful for you as well. Our quality assessment manual will also be updated to reflect the new standards, and we intend to publish this one in the first quarter of next year.
So I wanted to close out our conversation with a little bit of discussion of something that we really don't talk about all that much, and that is the significant oversight and due process that we go through for the standards development. And there's two groups that are key to that. One is the International Internal Audit Standards Board, and the second is the IPPF Oversight Council. Let's start with the Standards Board and the role that they play.
Yes, we have these two bodies involved in our standard setting process. the International Internal Audit Standards Board, the IASB. They set and develop the standards, and they have to make sure that the standards are of high quality and worthy of extensive global adoption and implementation. These people, these members, are all certified, highly qualified and experienced audit practitioners representing all regions over the world. And I can tell you that the IASB is doing a lot of heavy lifting to support the development of the new Global Internal Audit Standards.
The other group, the IPPF Oversight Council, is very valuable in the role that they play in ensuring the standards remain credible. Tell me a little bit about that.
Our IPPF Oversight Council is then responsible for providing oversight on the standard setting process by evaluating and advising the accuracy and appropriateness of the due process. So they do not look into the content of the standards, but they ensure that the due process is followed, which will then increase the confidence of internal audit stakeholders and internal audit practitioners all over the world. It's an independent body consisting of some eminent non-audit organizations. We have OECD there, we have IFAC, NECD, World Bank, Intosai, and recently also GNDI.
Kat, thank you so much for joining me today, and I did want to give you an opportunity to add anything if you'd like.
Thank you very much, Robert. Well, I would like to close actually with a big thank you to all the ones involved in the IPPF Evolution project. Thank you to everyone who has sent in their comments. We very much appreciate your vital contributions, which are driving our wonderful professions to the next level. Thank you very much.
For updates on the Global Internal Audit Standards, be sure to visit www.theiia.org/standards. Turn theory into practice at the 2023 ESG Virtual Conference, September 21st from 10 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. Attendees can earn 6.6 CPEs. To register, visit theiia.org/ESG Virtual Conference. Up next, Sara Gonzalez, ESG Risk Audit Manager at ING Spain, speaks with Trinity Corbejo about strategies for organizing and executing internal audit's response towards sustainability and aligning with the external auditor.
Hello, Sara. In your presentation, you list some short-term and long-term global risks related to ESG. Share some of those with us.
Well, the first thing that I would like to do is to explain the source of those global risks that I mentioned in my presentation. So every year, the World Economic Forum issues the Global Risk Report that includes the results of a survey that is completed by over 600 members of the World Economic Forum. In the latest report that was published in January this year, we can see the results of the survey, including the main global risk that we face in the short and in the long term. So if we focus on the short term, in the coming 2 years, the most serious global risk that is reported is the cost of living crisis, which is in the first position. And then it is followed by natural disasters and extreme weather events. We have to say that the cost of living crisis is already here. This situation only became worse in 2022, mainly driven by the geopolitical situation in Russia and Ukraine. So the next 2 years are dominated mainly by social risk, and specifically the cost of living crisis is the key risk. However, if we focus on the long term, on the next 10 years, we notice that the climate action failure dominates the next decade. The failure to mitigate climate change or to adapt to climate change, those are the two top risks. But also there are other environmental risks in the top 10, like natural disasters or the biodiversity loss. In fact, biodiversity loss is not considered as a concern in the short term, which is curious because then it's one of the most rapidly deteriorating global risks in the next decade. So we can conclude that climate and environmental risks are the core focus of global risk perceptions in the long term, but also are the risks for which we are seen to be the least prepared.
You provide some guidelines for implementing internal audit's response to the organization's ESG strategy. Where's a good place to start?
Yes, I would say that the first step is to understand the sustainability strategy of your entity and the organizational setup around ESG in your company. It is key to have a good understanding of the ESG strategy and the commitments that are defined in your company for ESG. So you need to know what are the sustainability material topics for your organization, the strategic priorities, or if there are public commitments done for ESG, like for example, to become net zero or to reduce the carbon footprint. Also, in terms of organization, to understand how the different ESG topics are managed in the company, who does what, how the different areas connect, how or what is the governance bodies that are in the company for ESG management, or what are the internal control frameworks around ESG, or to obtain the view of the key programs and initiatives related to ESG in your company. Those questions need to be solved when you start developing your audit response. Why? Well, because this will help you to really focus on the key topics and the key risks. Sustainability is a very wide concept. It is not realistic to expect to cover all the elements from the start. Then you should do a proper risk assessment and align with the ESG strategy of the company and focus your initial efforts on the material risk. For example, in ING, there is a clear focus on climate action on the strategy, so our internal audit response is also aligned with this priority. Also, the review of the organizational setup around ESG will help you to identify your key ESG stakeholders in the company. And this is very important for internal auditors because we need to develop business monitoring activities with those stakeholders. We need to gather their input, their feedback, their concerns on the different ESG developments and topics to help us to do our assessment of the ESG risk. And I would say that good news for all the people, all the companies that are starting this journey now is that there is a lot of literature and papers that were published in the last 2 years about this topic, specifically about how to embed ESG in internal audit function and what the role of internal audit should be. So I would say that it would be good also to read some of these guides or some of these papers and experience it from other peers, because you might learn from their practices and you can go faster when developing your approach. My personal experience is that internal auditors working on ESG are willing to share their views and learnings. So we all recognize that this is an evolving area and we can always learn from each other's.
Where do you start in defining the audit universe for ESG?
Well, maybe there is not a specific guidance for creating audit universe, but there are some reference in on those papers. But I would say that the first step when you start this journey is to review the existing audit universe that you have, because it's quite likely that you already have some ESG components in your audit entities, because probably there are elements that are not new at all for you, as there are ESG components like, for example, working practices, supply chain management, remuneration frameworks that you have been audited some years. So in fact, in 2021, in ING, when we started this journey, we recognize that there are some elements that we have been audited since 2008, for example. Specific policies to manage climate and environmental risks that have been there for years in ING in order to accept or reject clients or transactions is something that we have embedded in the credit risk approval processes or in the client approval processes. So it was part of those audits in the past. So this is the first thing. The second thing is, once you know what you have already in your audit universe, the next step is to fill the gaps with information you have. And as I mentioned before in the previous question, if you already have the overview of all the sustainability organization in your company and you know the key ESG strategic priorities, you can reflect the potential areas, processes, topics that should be in your audit universe. For example, if you see the audit universe for ING, the one that we have defined for ESG, you will notice that we focus a lot on the environmental part and not too much yet on the social part. But this is aligned with the ING sustainability priorities and the commitments that the company has met. Also, I think it is relevant to coordinate and align with other assurance providers. For example, with external auditor or other control functions like compliance, because also it is quite likely that they are doing some work for ESG in terms of assurance. For example, the role of external auditors in the review of ESG disclosure is becoming more and more relevant. But also, there could be still some specific ESG reports or disclosures that your company is doing and are not covered by them, and therefore they should be in the radar of internal audit. So this alignment with the assurance providers and external auditor could help you to first avoid potential audit overlaps, and second, to be more efficient when defining your audit universe and the coverage. Another element that I think is relevant when you try to define the universe is understanding the maturity level of the different initiatives in your organization or the different programs, because you need to assess which role you should play as internal auditor. Maybe not all the elements are ready for audit assurance, and there could be some elements where the role of internal audit should be more focused on advisory. And just to conclude on this question, I would like to say also that considering the changing environment of the ESG landscape, you might have to do changes in your audit universe. And this is something normal, because there are potentially new ESG risks that could become more material for your company in the next future, and you need to adapt your audit universe consequently. So it is quite likely your initial audit universe for ESG will increase in the future.
Clearly, ESG is a complex and evolving risk area, but can you summarize some key takeaways from your IC presentation?
Let me just mention 4 key takeaways that I mentioned in my presentation about the implementation of the internal audit response for ESG. The first one is, again, understand your organization's sustainability strategy, structure, and maturity level. As I said it before, this is key to assess what the material ESG risks are for your company, to align with the strategic priorities of your company, and to define your starting point to audit ESG topics. ESG is a very broad concept. It is very easy to get lost with many elements to consider, so focus on the ones that are material for your entity. Second one, allocate responsibilities within the internal audit team to design your audit response for ESG. As mentioned again before, ESG risks are very transversal risks affecting multiple business areas and geographies. So this is not an easy task. It requires time and dedication to understand well the ESG risk landscape and to define the audit universe and the best audit approach for your organization. So dedicate the attention and resource it needs. The third one, keep you updated. There are many new regulations, new standards, new practices, new trends that are occurring at this field, apart from all the internal developments that might be happening in your company at the same time. So for that, business monitoring is a key element to be updated internally in your company, but also do not forget to look outside, to be updated also about latest market trends and news on the topic. And the fourth one, I would say, is collaborate. Listen to other peers from your sector. Share your practices, your doubts, your concerns with them. There are many internal audit functions in the same journey now, and they have similar challenges. So you don't need to do it alone. You can learn together. Just to conclude, I would like to highlight that although there are many challenges because the ESG territory is developing and there are many uncertainties, this cannot be used as an excuse or limitation for internal audit not to get involved. No. ESG risks are very relevant for all the entities, so we cannot ignore those risks and we need to embed them in our internal audit activities. And in that sense, internal audit function is very well positioned to support the organizations on their journey towards a more sustainable future.
And now Michelle Hurley, Senior Product Marketing Specialist at Wolters Kluwer TeamMate, speaks with Greg Van Choik about important considerations in identifying a sustainability framework for your organization.
Do you believe most internal auditors are equipped to provide effective assurance in ESG today?
That's a great question, and one that I hear at almost every webinar that we host. So from my perspective, in my opinion, I do believe that as auditors, we are in the profession where we are equipped to provide assurance. So whether that means building acumen in terms of ESG, understanding what that means, and maybe acquiring some subject matter expertise. It's something that, may take a little while, but I think building the foundation of ESG is something that we're just building off of what we already know as auditors, understanding the E, the S, the G, where those frameworks are, and even in our particular regions, what that does mean for us. So, if we don't have the acumen or don't have the ability to understand or to obtain the knowledge, then we should also just seek it out. We have external resources. We can look to others who are subject matter experts in the field and, use your resources to the best of your abilities. And when you can look both internally as well as externally.
That's great. Thank you very much. And what are the steps to begin preparing?
The steps to begin preparing. So for ESG, it's been around for quite some time. I think it's a buzzword that we're all hearing now, but one that began, back, I'm hearing even as far as the 70s for some of our clients to say, I've been doing it since then. Back then, it was known as sustainability. Continued sustainability, especially in the 90s when we were looking more towards becoming a little bit more conscious of our environmental impact. And nowadays, we're actually breaking it apart by environmental, social, and governance. So looking at our impact on the climate, how we're doing in terms of the social aspects about diversity, equity, inclusion, even as part of that, and how we're actually governing each of our targets and objectives for ESG as part of the S. But I think when people are getting started, they feel like they're overwhelmed to some extent. So when I always say, how do you get started? Start small. Look at what you're already doing, because there's likely that you are doing ESG audits today. It may be termed something different, but look in terms of your audit plan today, see what categories that may fit in that ESG scope. And then also, of course, I think this kind of gets into a little bit more of our presentation in total, but looking at where your targets are for the organization. So as you're looking at your organization's ESG mandate or what those objectives and targets are, making sure that you're aligned with those, looking at your current audit plan, seeing if that is truly aligned with the audit plan, adjusting it if you need to, looking at gaps, and then also looking at the frameworks for your particular industry. Are you looking at what are the most common looked at areas or the areas that are generally impacting your industry? And is there any specificities or nuances that you're maybe not able to cover from, say, a GRI, but you might have a combination and what you might be looking at to fill in the gaps. But number one, start small and just, take those steps on the path to ESG. You don't have to start running. You can start with those small steps.
One last question for you. In the journey to integrated assurance, what does the maturity curve look like?
So this is one that I wish my co-speaker, Jim Pelletier, was here. We are going to be providing an actual visual maturity map for assurance on ESG. So as I mentioned, it really starts with becoming acclimated with ESG, understanding the framework. But as you get further along and you're getting to be a more mature organization, it's having the very robust reporting, even using technology to help advance your division or your company's ESG progression. So using technology to report, having that integrated ESG frameworks into your solution as well as your reporting. So it depends on your path, but more than likely, if you come to our sessions tomorrow, you'll be able to see that.
That's great. Thank you so very much for your insight today.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
And now for a bit of challenging fun we call In Focus. The IIA received responses to the Global Internal Audit Standards survey from around the world. By percentage, which region had the most respondents? Was it the Middle East, Europe, North America, Africa, Latin America, or Asia Pacific? We'll be back with the answer right after this. Are you ready to plus yourself with the IIA? Plus your resume, plus your career, plus yourself with certificate programs from the IIA. Learn more at theiia.org/plus yourself. Now here's the answer to our In Focus challenge, which was the IIA received responses to the Global Internal Audit Standards survey from around the world. By percentage, which region had the most respondents? The Middle East comprised 5%. Europe made up 26%. Latin America 13%. Africa 10%. Asia Pacific 13%. North America had the largest percentage of respondents at 33%. Thank you for joining us. Be sure to like, subscribe, leave comments, or a rating. If you'd like to enjoy an extended version of the discussions featured today, visit theiia.org, where IIA members get access to a longer version of this episode with bonus information and insights on sustainability. Getting Started With is a new series of informative videos to jumpstart your learning on important internal audit topics. You'll get helpful tools, pro tips, and terms to learn to make your job easier. To watch, visit www.theiia.org/video. Thanks for joining us for all things internal audit from the IIA. We'll connect again soon.